Councilmember Reed. Absent. Councilmember Schmisher.
Here.
Councilmember B. Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Stein.
Here.
Councilmember Tracy.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Here.
Mayor Smith.
Here. We will now please rise for our prayer by Alicia Swearingen from the Royal Gorge Vineyard, and then the Pledge of Allegiance.
Well, Heavenly Father, we are just so grateful and filled with gratitude for our community and our city and all the lives that you touch. Lord, thank you for just a great place to live. Lord, we pray that we would have much wisdom in just how to steward this land well. So bless this meeting, bless the decisions being made and going forth. Lord, we just commit them to you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty.
Recording in progress.
Thank you all, and thank you all who are here in attendance today. We definitely appreciate your participation in local governance. If you have anything that you'd like to address City Council about that is not already on the agenda, there is a time now that you can approach City Council if you wish. Seeing none, we will defer to the items on the agenda. Council member announcements? Councilmember Tracy.
I just wanted to mention that last Thursday I had the opportunity to attend the Colorado Municipal League Legislative Workshop in Denver. And so I'll just write up a brief summary of that. It was just a review of current proposed legislation, expected legislation, plus a couple of panel discussions on collective bargaining, possibility around legislation on that, and also recycling.
Thank you, Councilmember Tracy. We appreciate that. Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to remind everybody that we do have a Vision Committee meeting this Wednesday at 5 p.m. in these chambers. And then also a week from Wednesday, we also have the KRLN radio interview with the city elected officials.
Yes, and I believe Mayor Pro Tem, you're on the agenda for that, but we are seeking another council member to join him. If you wish, please let John know so that you guys can be there. Is that a yes, Tim? Sure. All right.
Cool.
So Tim Dennehy will join you this month. Thank you to you both. Any other announcements? Yes, Amy, or Councilmember Schmisher.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to commend CCPD and particularly Commander Bell. I understand that he has received a placement in the National Academy of the FBI for this fall, which is a huge honor. So I just wanted to note that. And if Police Chief Schick would like to say anything.
Oh, I'm tickled to death. We're excited to get him up there and just expand our knowledge and expertise. It's a very special opportunity.
That's a prestigious appointment.
Indeed.
Absolutely. Congratulations. Okay, now I'll turn the time over to Administrator Stevens. If you can please go over our consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Item 7A is to approve the minutes of the regular city council meeting on February 7th and the general government meeting on February 9th. 7B is to authorize the mayor to sign a water service contract for 590 Dozier Avenue. 7C authorizes the mayor to sign an event agreement with Aravepa Running and Rides of Colorado Springs. 7D awards bid S0122 annual water meter and water meter register purchase to Core and Main of Henderson, Colorado, in an amount not to exceed $60,000. 7E awards bid 1322 Silverado work trucks to Dellenbach Motors in an amount not to exceed $94,600.80. 7F awards bid 2122, the 500 block of Main Street South Alley to Jarco Construction in an amount not to exceed $119,979.20. 7G awards bid 2522 Chevrolet 2500 work trucks with a snowplow to Daniels Long Chevrolet in an amount not to exceed $41,608.74. 7H is the monthly budget summary, and 7I is cash disbursements and P-card disbursements.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilmember Tracy?
I just would like to have either questions or comments, discussion about items B, C, and H. So I don't know if those need to be removed from consent. Or
You can have questions or comments and
Okay.
direct them, and if there needs to be added debate, we can move it off the consent agenda.
Okay,
So,
shall I
yeah,
go ahead?
Go
then?
ahead, please.
All right. In regard to item 7B, just wanted to hear a little bit more. If I'm understanding correctly, it's a water service contract for property that's outside of the city limits. But what I'd like to know more about, and then just kind of generally wonder if we should address this more explicitly each time there's a similar situation, and that is the property at 590 Dozier, is it currently in the Park Center Water District service area or not? Or is it somehow included in the city service area, even though it's outside of the city? I just would like to hear more about that.
Yeah, it is not in the Park Center water service area. It is within the Canyon City service area, even though it is not in the city boundaries. So the water department has a service area that expands beyond the city boundaries of Canyon City.
Right, and so then let's see, in number 5 in that water service contract, the language in number 5, is that in reference to that current service area for the city, or what we used to call the Blue Line, I think, but I'm not sure what it's called now.
Travis, I don't know if you, Kim?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure if there was a question there.
yeah, there's a question about item 5 in the water service contract, but
Do
do you want to
say
repeat
that
that?
again?
Yeah.
Sure, hi, Kim.
If you would, please.
I just wondered, in number 5 in the water service contract, where it refers to not just the elevation, but also says, does not lie easterly of the east line of section 29 and 32, and so on. Is that reference to those sections and lines in regard to the area the city does serve and doesn't go beyond what we used to call the blue line?
Those are not, those aren't necessarily boundaries for, the line. Those are geographic lines. So, when, like a topo line, when we can't go above a particular elevation or that particular degree south, it has to do with the ability of the distribution system to service those areas. It doesn't necessarily mean that's part of the end of our, well, it is the end of our service, but that's why. It's an engineering reason, not a boundary reason.
Got it. So all of 5 is really applying or related to that?
Yeah,
Related
correct.
to elevation. Okay, I understand. And I think that's all the questions I had on B.
Is there anyone else that has questions on the Dozier Avenue water service contract? Okay. Emily, did you have more on the service contract?
On B, no.
Okay.
But you did have other questions?
C.
See?
Okay.
Yeah, right. Shall I jump in? I know that we've seen some revisions even as recently as today on that. And I just had a question specifically about, I see that there was a line added under, in regard to the special event agreement, there's a line added in 2A at the end about the event organizer shall not allow parking anywhere along or adjacent to County Road 3A. And I wondered, is parking addressed anywhere else in this agreement, or does it need to be, or do we think that that's sufficient?
Yeah, I think for this event, parking, Rex has had a discussion with the event organizer regarding parking, and I think that they determined there was sufficient parking elsewhere. We do have a Trails meeting for the Vision Committee meeting in March, and perhaps that's part of a bigger discussion for future events.
If I may, in their proposal, it states that they will, they're requesting overflow parking along F30, and they had also requested in their proposal parking along County Road 3A, which we obviously were not comfortable with. So that's why that specific line about 3A was
Right.
added into the contract.
I know that the language in the proposal is different from what we see here, and I just wanted to be sure that we didn't think there was more that would be needed in the actual written agreement regarding parking. And then I have, I think, just one other question on the agreement. Should I proceed with that?
Are there any other questions on this particular item? Just want to make sure everybody has their chance.
Sure, just. Yeah, I just have one
Okay.
other thing on the
Sure.
agreement, but whatever. So on item 2, and I think there was a renumbering maybe in here, but the new version of item 2G, where there's an itemization of the things that the event organizer needs to provide, is there a deadline set for when that information needs to be provided by? And if there's not in here, do we need one in here?
Yeah, I don't know that we, this event is coming up fairly quickly, so, typically, we want that information 60 days in advance, but, we're working closely with the event organizer to make sure that we're getting that information that we need.
So staff doesn't feel the need to have a deadline date in here?
An additional deadline, no.
That's all.
Although I may on item G want to change from the Bureau of Land Management to the Bureau.
And in the revision, we did make that change.
Okay.
And my only other question, Madam Mayor, is in regard to item H in the consent agenda, so I'll wait. till
All
we
right,
get there.
Councilmember Schmisher.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had 2 questions for the lawyers related to the contract, and then one more policy question. So Catherine, I was wondering, with regard to Aravepa's proposal that they would also, in addition to the 5% of event entry fees, be provided to the city. I believe that they had also, in their proposal, mentioned that an additional 3% of entry fees would be provided to FAR, and that isn't in this contract. Given that that's an agreement with an outside entity that is not part of the city, I wasn't sure if that needed to be in this contract, given that it was part of their proposal or not.
I mean, the city could put it in there and require the event organizer to pass that money on, even though the third party is not party to this contract. You could put that in there if you wanted to. I don't know why it wasn't put in there. There may be a reason, so I don't want to.
Yeah, that was organized between Rex and the event organizer, so I don't know if there's a specific reason why it's not in
But
there.
it could be in there.
Okay. I mean, I think if it's part of their proposal, and that's part of what we are kind of assessing as to whether or not we would want this event in our community, it makes sense that it should be in there unless there's a reason why it isn't.
That is a good question of why it was excluded, if it was there before, but we may need an,
Yeah, so it's
Well, without-
part of the proposal, not necessarily part of the contract. So,
is that something that would be worked out between FAR and them? Because I don't know if we can really enter into a contract with a third party, and they don't even have necessarily their representation here.
Well, I think as long as, they wanted to take the money in, we could require it to be paid to that third party, or that it be paid to the city and we would pass it on, one or the other. So it could be in there if you wanted it. It's up to you all.
Okay. If
But I think if you're
desired, that would
gonna-
be an amendment.
Sorry, I was going to say, if you're going to amend it, I'd remove it from the consent agenda, so.
Good counsel.
Okay. I guess without understanding the reason why it wasn't included, I'm kind of at a crossroads as to whether or not we should amend. But my second question for the lawyers, I am very appreciative of the fact that in 2B, It notes that the security deposit shall not limit the liability of the event organizer to the city, meaning that if more than $3,000 worth of damages are caused, the city can require that they reimburse more than $3,000 worth of damages.
Correct.
Wonderful. My question on that was related to, was related to number 6, the condition of trails. The last sentence of which states the amount of any needed repair shall be deducted from the security deposit pursuant to section 2B of this agreement. So I'm assuming that we are covered, given that 2B states that if more than $3,000 worth of damages. Okay.
Yeah, that's just like, you know, the first step to deduct from the security deposit, and then 2B is like, well, if it's 6,000, then we're gonna expect that other 3, so.
And then my one policy question was, I specifically asked how the city will ensure that the 5% that we receive from event registrations are specifically earmarked for trails. And I can either read your response or if you would like to comment on that, Ryan.
Yeah, I think, you know, what we talked about internally was earmarking those dollars into a special revenue fund where they could only be used for trail maintenance in the future. But again, I think that might be a bigger discussion for the vision meeting to make sure that's what council actually wants to do with those funds, but that would be the suggested solution.
Thank you so much. And just for I guess, public awareness, on March 23rd at 5 p.m., we're planning to have a meeting about kind of trail usage, outside entities coming in, wanting to use our trails, and kind of how do we have a strategic plan around that. And would certainly welcome all public input and ideas at that meeting.
Thank you. Are there other items on the consent agenda with questions or comments? Councilmember Tracy, you did mention you had some other.
Yes, thanks. In regard to item H, just a general question when we get to sales tax collection during 2021 and 2A collection, the unaudited numbers compared to what we budgeted, there's roughly $1 million difference on the sales tax collections between what was budgeted and what the unaudited numbers were for 2021. And similarly, sales tax, the 2A tax rather, there's similarly kind of a more or less $1 million difference in our favor, but I guess it just raises a question about if we're that far off in our budget versus actual at the end of the year. Not only raises a question about then how do we allocate that, or how do we deal with that difference, and does it impact how we want to do budgeting in the future? But any staff comments on that would be great.
Well, I think probably the answer, and Ryan, you can expound on it, is that this was the year that we went to state collected sales tax, which particularly collected the online sales, which was not sufficiently being done on the local level. And so we really weren't able to predict what the difference in the sales tax collection would be for this year. But now that we're starting to get that, we'll be able to have a much better anticipation. And besides that, we always go on the conservative side too of maybe worst case scenario or based on trends, so that we're always under budget instead of overspending. It's always pleasant when we collect more than we anticipate. Ryan, would you like to add anything else?
Yeah, I think, you know, the mayor makes a valid point. From going to state collected, we collected more, and we didn't know exactly how that was going to affect our sales tax collection this year. So we were very conservative in our projections. And, you know, also with COVID, you know, we've seen some of the, and other areas have seen some of those sales tax collections increase as well. So, you know, from a prediction standpoint, it's been a little bit more challenging the last year or two.
Didn't Tammy say that there was like 800 businesses that were operating locally that weren't paying city sales tax, but were paying to the state?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact number, but there was a high number that, you know, they were paying state collected taxes, but they weren't paying locally.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
And perhaps, if you could, Ryan, would you just walk us through a little bit what happens if we have a budget surplus?
Yeah, so budget surplus goes into the general fund or whichever fund that surplus was generated in, and that goes into reserves for future years. So
So it's basically saved.
that's correct.
And so for Councilmember Tracy, you had a particular, pointed out the two-way sales tax collection. And two-way, by the law that was passed by the people, that 2A money must stay in the 2A entity or collection. And so that money will, the excess, that means we have another street that we can pave. And it has to go to paving or reconstruction of streets. It cannot go towards extra staff. It cannot go towards anything but reconstruction alone.
And as you look at the 2022 budget, particularly in 2A streets, we did more projects, or we're trying to catch up on projects that we didn't do last year with those extra funds.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick, did you have more comments?
Yeah, just one more question. This is a general one, but on the vehicles that we're ordering or have signed a purchase order for or will sign a purchase order for, do you have an estimate on delivery? I mean, it's good to hear some of the realities out there when you're ordering a vehicle.
Yeah, I think some of these, because they're state bids, they had already ordered some of the vehicles, so hopefully we get them sooner, but I don't have an exact delivery. And even when we do get exact delivery times, it's still, vendors are still missing the targets.
Councilmember Smith.
I just had a quick question about, while we were on H with the budget, the monthly budget, now that we've went state collected, what is the timeline that it's actually behind? Because I knew, but when we were locally collected, it was like a month usually before it would reflect the current numbers. Is it still in that 30-day range, or is it more like 2 months?
Yeah, so, for example, December collections close, I think it's the third or fourth week in January. So that's when retailers have to submit those figures to the state. And then it's about another month before we actually see what those figures are. So
We're sitting in that 60-day turnaround. Thank you.
correct.
If there's no further questions or discussion, I'd like to entertain a motion for the consent agenda and agenda.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda and agenda as written.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call a vote, please.
Councilmember Dennehy?
Aye.
Councilmember Schmischer?
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Stein?
Aye.
Councilmember Tracy?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. Councilmember Stevens, Administrator Stevens, would you like to give us an administration report for today?
You have a extended report written report in your packet. Councilwoman Schmischer stole my thunder regarding Tim Bell, so that was an additional comment I was going to add.
It's worth a double comment.
Yeah, so Commander Tim Bell will be going to the fall session of the FBI National Academy. So very proud of that accomplishment and the level of knowledge that will bring back to the police department. That's that type of information and level of education is great to add into the skills and services that the police department offers. The other highlight I wanted to make sure, and I know we've talked about it previously in other meetings, but the grand opening, the ribbon cutting for the Royal Cascade Trail is planned for March 5th at 2 p.m. So, please make sure that is on your calendars. And I'm happy to take any questions regarding the written report.
So on that ribbon cutting, I believe we're meeting at the Tunnel Drive at 2, and because it is over a mile to get to the trailhead of the Royal Cascade, there are hay rides available for those who wish to have that. So give yourself time and wear the shoes to get up there, but that's going to be an exciting trail. Any other questions for Ryan at this time? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Ryan. I would like to now open the public hearing. And this is for the Keystone Ridge preliminary plan. Patrick Mulready, I'd like to turn the time over to you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. This evening, we are here to consider a request by the owner of a parcel located in the 2900 block of South Street to create a new residential subdivision. The request before City Council this evening is a preliminary plan, which is the first step in a major subdivision. The subject property is a 24.09 acre parcel located at the southeast corner of South Street and what will be the extension of North Reynolds Avenue, north of its current terminus at Juniper Street. The property is currently undeveloped and unimproved with utilities beyond the service mains located around the property in the existing rights-of-way. The site has an active terrain with a more than 46-foot grade differential between the low spot on the property, where the property borders lots on Robbie Lane, to a high point near the intersection of South Street and Rockefeller Avenue. The property is currently zoned MH1, Mobile Home Park Zone District, which the applicant has indicated to us they will file to change to R1 low-density residential at the time of final plat. Both MH1 and R1 have a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet, so the same minimum lot size and frontage will apply in the case of both of the two both of the two zone districts. The applicant is proposing to create a 68-foot residential subdivision, a 68-lot residential subdivision intended for construction of single-family homes. Under the existing zoning, as well as the anticipated R1 rezoning request, all lots within this subdivision exceed the minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet and a 60-foot lot frontage along a dedicated public street. The applicant has established an internal street network that provides adequate circulation. It also provides 2 points of access into the subdivision, one from South Street and one from the extension of North Reynolds Avenue. There is no proposed access to Rockefeller Avenue. There are also 2 detention ponds at the southeast corner and southwest corner of the proposed subdivision. The applicant is proposing to complete the subdivision in 4 phases, or filings. Page 4 of the staff report summarizes the number of lots, acreage for streets, and acreage for stormwater detention within each phase. The internal streets, utilities, and drainage infrastructure associated with each phase will be constructed at the time of final plat approval for each phase. Each final plat will be accompanied by a subdivision improvement agreement that will specify the engineered cost estimate for the public improvements, and the applicant will provide financial security in that amount to the city. The city's Unified Development Code provides 8 criteria in section 1709.010 for the evaluation of new subdivision proposals. Staff has evaluated this proposed subdivision and made findings for each beginning on page 5 of the Planning Commission staff report. And under those criteria, staff finds that the proposed subdivision is acceptable and can be considered for approval. Now, at the time of the Planning Commission hearing, the night of January 26, we did have one resident who lives on Juniper Avenue who came forward to speak at the public hearing on this. This particular individual's concern was that they did not want to see more mobile homes being moved into the area. When he was informed that the applicant intended to file to rezone this property to R1, he withdrew his objection to the project. That is the only public comment that we have had on this project. And with that, staff and the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council approve the preliminary plan proposal for the Keystone Ridge subdivision, subject to the referral comments from the city's Water Department, the Fire District, and the Sanitation District going forward for final plat. That would conclude the staff presentation. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have. Also present to speak on behalf of this application is Matt Koch, who is representing the project.
Matt Koch, do you want to go ahead and just address City Council on the project, and then we'll open up to questions?
Patrick did a good job of describing it. We are planning on doing 4 phases. We want to get going as soon as possible. don't know what else I can say. We've spent quite a good time laying this out, making sure the lots are buildable. We contacted several of the builders in the area to see what size of lots and type of lots they would like, so we've used a lot of that input to develop this. The ditch along the south line is the Fruitland ditch. There is an existing 15-foot easement on our property. It will be maintained by the Fruitland ditch. There is no impact to any residential lots from the Fruitland ditch. It's all adjacent to the right-of-ways and through the detention ponds. Other than that, if you have any questions.
All right, if you wouldn't mind just staying there, because you may need to be called upon. Councilmember Stein.
Yes, I have several questions. I am concerned about the Fruitland ditch that is the southern border of this development. And I see that the one part of the stormwater drainage would be Phase 1 up in the upper left corner there. But I don't see the other one, the other stormwater drainage, it looks like it isn't until Phase 4. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I want to make sure that, first of all, we don't have any, once construction begins and there's paving and development and the natural grasses that are holding the drainage now are taken out by construction, I just want to make sure that we don't have a situation where there's a huge deluge and we have a lot of drainage into that ditch, and then there's trailer parks directly on the other side. I just want to make sure we've thought all that through, and I wanted to double check with you tonight as to your plans and what kind of oversight you're going to have in that, because I think going forward that's going to be a critical thing. Plus, we do have city code, I believe, that if you live adjacent to a ditch, whether or not you own shares in that ditch, you're responsible to help with upkeep. Is that correct?
And it depends on the ditch company. Different ditch companies have different regulations. And you're right, this is not serviced by that ditch, Fruitland ditch. All the people to the south get the water out of that. It is an open concrete line ditch. We've spent lots on engineering to make sure the stormwater is managed properly, getting into the detention facilities and not entering the ditch. Kim Schwarnigan with the city reviewed all of our plans and concurred that they were suitable for what we're trying to propose there. And as far as who maintains the ditch and what have you, that'll be up to the ditch company to enforce on that end. The people, there is an easement there for the ditch company, and since it is a concrete line, there shouldn't be much maintenance, maybe some cleaning some trash out and such, but that'll be up to the ditch company to enforce that at the time.
Okay, so individual property owners do not have any responsibility to help maintain the ditch then?
I don't believe so on this case, no.
Okay, because...
May I speak? I'm sorry. Councilmember Stein, a couple things. It's usually not necessarily the property owner, it's the shareholders that have to maintain their ditches. So as shareholders, the folks on the south side have that maintenance to be obligated to. This particular development does not have shares in that ditch, so they would not be obligated necessarily unless we had something that was coming from their specific subdivision. In regards to your construction question, we have what are called temporary BMPs. We would have to have their stormwater management plan, and they would apply for a guest permit through the city, as well as their state stormwater permit.
Thank you, Swearingen. And I just wanted to make sure, because does this differ from ditch to ditch?
Yeah, but part of that too is that for an easement for a general water run. Some ditches, the ditch company itself maintains those, and so that's why they would need an easement so they can get their
Because we do
equipment
have
there.
code on the books that if you live next to the, because the only reason
So
I
that
know
might
is.
be the
yeah.
laterals.
Yeah.
So if there's a lateral that runs through your property, it's your job, whether you own shares or not, to
Right.
keep that lateral clean.
Okay.
And if you own shares, obviously, you have to keep the lateral in your property line clean. But I haven't looked super close into this, but there won't be any laterals going into these properties.
It
This is
doesn't look
just
like
the
it. No, right,
major
right.
ditch coming through, and so probably it would be the Fruitland Ditch's responsibility for that maintenance, and that's why they need the easement to do so.
Yeah, and Mayor Smith is absolutely correct. It is, laterals are the people, even if it goes through your property, that is your concern. The main ditch is the ditch company's concern to keep clean. It has nothing to do with the people on the ditch. That is the ditch company. The main channel is the ditch company's responsibility.
And
Thank
there
you.
have been some construction projects where there was runoff from their property, and we have had, and it wasn't at this location, obviously, but at others, just as an example of enforcement, that it is watched, the project is watched by city staff, and if they are not doing the protocols that were agreed upon on their permit, they will be contacted and asked to remediate the damage that was caused and to go into compliance. And so that is watched and enforced, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yep.
That process, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
And I just kind of wanted to add on to that, that because we have a permitting authority from the EPA, the city actually issues the permits for stormwater management, and what Kim Swearingen referred to as the GESC, which is the grading, erosion, and sediment control permit that is required for that construction activity. So there's a couple of different permits they have to have that deal with water quality and quantity.
Yeah, but thank you for keeping that in mind and having that on your agenda as far, because, I mean, that is your responsibility over the ditches and that you're their voice, so. Yeah. That is good to know. Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Either Director Swearingen or Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick, may I ask at what point does that permitting process happen?
Prior to any construction, you're not authorized construction without having those permits in place.
So the next step in the process after this application will be the final plat, and presumably the final plat will be for either Phase 1, since those will be the lots adjacent to an existing right-of-way, they just have to finish that right-of-way for North Reynolds, or Phases 1 and 2. And as part of that, when we get that application in and review it, we will create a subdivision improvements agreement that will cost estimate the public improvements. That's how the city will get the financial security, so that in the event of a developer default, the city can go in and finish the project. Now, after the final plat has been approved and after it's been recorded, before the applicant can begin doing any work on site, they have to file for a grading and drainage permit. That's the GESC permit that Ms. Swearingen spoke about. She can speak a bit more about the specifics of this, but that's when they have to show us what best management practices they're putting in place. That's where they have to show us, how they're going to be grading. And we have some requirements from them about things like, not tracking dirt onto an existing public street so that it creates, hazards on the street or unsightly conditions on the street, that sort of thing.
I had a few additional questions, if that's all right. I wanted to ask, with regard to our 1709010 subdivision standards for review, the second one is placemaking, which is the subdivision has a distinctive identity and brand that is utilized in the signs, streetscape architecture, public gathering spaces, and open spaces. And I was hoping that you could just speak a little bit to that. How will you make Keystone Ridge a place?
Okay. Yeah, it is Keystone Ridge. Several of the street names will be related to that, Keystone Loop and Keystone Circle. It'll be have its own entity, just because there is no connecting streets coming out of it, new proposed ones. It all connects to the existing South Street and North Reynolds. So basically, all the interior roadways will be Keystone. It has its own identity. There will be signs. The owner is actually creating an entrance sign that is pretty remarkable with Keystone Ridge on it, and it'll be posted out front and make it look, very classy. So,
Is there an HOA for the maintenance of those signs or any sort of?
no, we're going to try to place them on a lot and have that lot owner take care of those in the future within an easement through that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there Mike?
So sorry. My apologies, Councilmember Smith. Shall I repeat that?
Yes, please.
I had asked Mr. Mulready if he would speak a little bit more about number F under the subdivision standards for review, which has to do with the impact on public facilities and resources, and the required impact fees being calculated within a reasonable proportion.
So the existing infrastructure in South Street and in the North Reynolds right-of-way, it has sufficient capacity so that it can be expanded into the site. And then as each lot comes under development, part of what will happen at the building permit process is that they will be paying the tap fees that are necessary, and they will build their own service lines going from the mains within the streets within the subdivision to the individual units. So there is adequate capacity. They have imposed some conditions that they'd like to see met at final plat, but the capacity is there. So we have made a finding that there are no unusual resources that are being required to extend municipal services for this project.
Thank you. I just have two more, hopefully pretty quick ones. I just wanted to confirm with you, sir, with regard to the referral agency comments from the Water Department, the Sanitation District, and the Fire Protection District, that you don't see any issues or barriers to meeting these requirements or recommendations.
No, we don't. We've already put those within our engineering development plans, so we have reviewed those comments and incorporated them into our design. So,
Great, thank you so much. No further questions.
Any other questions for the applicant or for staff? Are there any comments from the public? Okay, you can go ahead and be seated. Thank you. Councilmember Smith?
I'd like to make a motion. Or is it
Well,
still a public
first,
hearing?
I will close the public
Okay.
hearing. Now you can.
All right. Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve the Keystone Ridge preliminary plan.
I second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? I just want to thank you for fulfilling one of our greatest needs in Canyon City, and that's additional housing. So it's very exciting, and I look forward to this development. All right, we'll call a vote.
Councilmember Dennehy?
Aye.
Councilmember Smisher?
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Stein?
Aye.
Councilmember Tracy?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Thank you, council. Thank you, Patrick. And again, congratulations to you both. It's now time for item 6A. This is the second reading and adoption by title only of Ordinance 3, Series of 2022. And this is concerning the municipal code for liquor licensing. Ryan Stevens.
This is a second reading. These are amendments to the liquor code. We've not received any additional public comment, correct, Cindy? Okay. And staff would still recommend passing this on second reading.
Any discussion? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion. Councilmember Dennehy.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to adopt Ordinance 3, Series of 2022.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll call a vote.
Councilmember Dennehy?
Aye.
Councilmember Smisher?
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Stein?
Aye.
Councilmember Tracy?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
All right, the motion has carried. Thank you, City Council, and thank you, staff, for your work on this item. It is now time for item 6B. This is the second reading and adoption by title only of Ordinance 4, Series of 2022, entitled, An Ordinance of the City of Canyon City amending Title 10 of the Canyon City Municipal Code, by the addition of a new chapter 10.10 concerning UTVs. Before we go to the city administrator for a staff report, I did just want to do a clarification for the interest of the public. I don't know if we really made that clarification very clear, that this has been a conversation for a while, probably pre-COVID, and then last year, Brandon, do you want to do some more clarification about the committee that was formed to address the request by citizens for this consideration?
So I was approached by a group of 10-plus citizens in July of 2021, and I met with Ryan, and we had discussed it in length at 2 general government meetings before setting up the committee, and then we had 2 work sessions with both the chief, members of council, and members of the community that were interested in this, and we exchanged ideas. I wish we could have accomplished this on the dais a little sooner than February of 2022, but it's here now, and I'm pretty proud of the work that we've done with the committee and with the public.
Ryan Stevens.
Yeah, I just, one clarification there. You said members of council. It was 2 members that were appointed, and I believe it came up during a city council meeting. I believe we had a general government meeting about it, and then the most recent general government meeting with a draft ordinance was December 8th, I believe, and then first reading, of course, at the last city council meeting, and second reading now. Council, I believe, you have seen the emails. We've added any emails that we have received to the record, but there were several emails that were sent to city council, and I believe you have a list of folks that may want to speak tonight as well.
We do. So I did, every email that I received, I did pass it on to Ryan Stevens and to Cindy to make sure that that was made a part of public record, just for the benefit of you all to know that. We do have a number of people who wish to speak. I would like to invite, if you have not filled out a request to speak to council, that the forms are just on that small table, please fill it out and pass it on to Cindy right over here at the end if you wish to speak to council. We'll now start with comments from city council first. Councilmember Stein.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question because I was in kind of transition
Sure.
when this committee was formed. Did we have any input from businesses or people involved with trails on this committee?
I'm not sure if I can answer that question. I know there was several business owners that were in attendance to that. As far as trail people, I think that's what they are. They're trail people, and they're looking at a easier way to get their unit to a trail than loading it and unloading it. These are massively large units.
So what I was thinking of was maybe somebody from FAR might have been, part of that discussion.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Also, how far, the trails that they are allowed access to, how far are they from town?
Once again, I can't answer that question. I know that the goal of this group is to start with the city and then eventually move to the county. Trying to get Custer and Fremont to connect so that they can ride their, because it is legal in Custer.
So they need to get access to Fremont County roads then?
Correct. That's the
their
next
goal?
step.
Okay. Thank you.
And Andrea, I'd like to kind of expound, because I think we have been in a little bit of transition as a city council in this past year, and just with rebooting from just COVID recovery mode, that in the past when we have appointed committees, we really wanted to make sure that we represented all sides of the story, and so those who were for and those who were against. And I feel like we probably failed in getting some of those other people from the other side at the table, because that really helped prevent a lot of consternation between different user groups. And I would definitely want to make sure and ask that city staff helps us, and as a city council, help when next time we do have a committee formed, that we do make sure that we consider the business owners and all parties that may or may not be concerned, and even just regular citizens, so they all can have a hearing ear. And the more diverse group of people that we have on that board, the more sure we are to make a good and right decision. And I have to say that's a failure that we probably made in this particular instance.
And just to clarify, this wasn't a formal committee, it was a work session. Is there a reason that we called it a work session instead of a committee?
I don't know that, you know, we called them work sessions, but it was
Okay,
kind of a citizen committee.
just
Yeah.
clarifying.
Yeah, I don't know that there was a distinction between those two things. I think, you know, when we talked about it during one of those meetings, you know, there was a request for council representation, council for the user groups that were interested. But in the future, we could put it out as a public call for committee members. I don't know what was done previously with some of those committee groups.
So just for future reference, that we would usually, when we made of those official appointments, so this was definitely a more casual work session for sure. In the past, we had it where we would have those who were for it, those who were against it. We'd have slots for maybe 2 business owners and slots for at least 2 citizens, and then 2 council members, and then a staff member, and then somebody that would be considered neutral to conduct those meetings. Then we would take letters of interest to be on that committee, and then the city council would ultimately decide and appoint people to be on that committee. And so that worked really well in the past, especially for exploring issues that we anticipated being controversial. I mean, we can't always anticipate what will or won't be controversial. Sometimes we're surprised when we come to city council in the rooms for like, oh, we didn't realize this was going to be such a big deal. But we can always take a step back and make sure we accommodate all parties. But just for future reference, for everybody, let's make sure we do that in the future. So, okay, Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to expand on that a little bit. Probably the more correct language is stakeholders rather than pro or anti, but make sure that we have all the stakeholders present at the meetings. This was, I think, a little bit, I think we find ourselves a little bit undone by the process here because we did have work sessions, and you know, it seemed as though things were moving along in a good manner, but a lot of the input that we've received on this has said, well, gee whiz, city council, you know, you haven't made this public. You really haven't publicized this. And I don't think council, you know, and that really puts us on the horns of a dilemma, because council doesn't really have a way to publicize what could be a topic with lots of stakeholders involved. There's not really a natural or an easy way to do that, except through our Citizens Committee idea that we've been trying to work on and trying to implement as a council for quite a while. And we probably did not do as good a job here, but maybe it was because we were thinking a work session was at a different type of activity than a true Citizens Committee. But council was responding to a group of citizens who had a concern and wanted council to address the concern. And council tried its best through this process to do that with the assistance of multiple, you know, departments within our city, including our police department. But so it's a little bit difficult when you have concerns that are raised essentially at a late point in the process, because how do you deal with those? You don't want to create a precedent where someone who wants to create a public you know, controversy can derail a process. You want to have a process that's fair to all involved. And to that end, I would, you know, one thing that I think for sure that this council feels, at least based on what I've heard in the discussions that we've had, is that this is not cast in stone. This is a trial, and we do intend to monitor the effect of this ordinance, both in, I'm sure, in our personal daily lives as we see how this plays out, if it passes tonight, and to make sure that we've got, that we understand what the consequences to our citizens are. Because we have, this is a diverse community, and we do have different interests and stakeholders, and we want to make sure that we can find a way to go forward that honors everybody's input. And that's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Councilmember Tracy.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just to kind of add to what others have said, we have, by email, received some really good input, some valuable, detailed input by email, and I look forward to hearing those who speak tonight after we're done talking up here. I look forward to hearing from you all, too. Many questions, concerns, issues have been raised in the communications that we've had so far. Safety, potential safety issues, potential noise issues, depending on what kind of muffler we really are dealing with here, potential emissions issues. Also, information communicated to us about some experiences in other communities that have considered doing this or have tried it and then had some struggles with it. I don't know what direction we'll want to go tonight as a council, but I think if we want to do some kind of a one-year trial or whatever it ends up being, a couple of questions I have, and one of them is, how do we, I think we need to have a real concrete plan of how we measure the success or failure if we go forward with this. In other words, we want to be sure we have the ability to track complaints, to track problems with noise, whatever the issues are. We'd want to have, a good year's worth of data saying there's been no problem, or saying there's been so many problems, we're going to end it sooner than a year, whatever it is. So I want to be sure that as staff, that either we already have a plan for this, or we're pretty sure we're already able to collect the kind of data we need in order to measure success or failure. And then a specific question I have, if we really want to time limit this in order to evaluate it, do we need sunset language, so to speak, in this ordinance to say that it will expire by a certain date in the future, and then, as we evaluate it, we can extend it, or, have language that would allow us to extend it if we feel that it's working okay.
Councilmember Smith.
So if we're going to track noise and everything else, then we need to track Harleys and all the other things that are on the streets that are making noise and maybe not look street legal or be safe. And I think that the safety features of these units speak for themselves. We've kind of went 30 ways on this, and it's totally changed document since we first started. So I just want you to remind everybody that vehicles on the road make noise. Motorcycles make noise. We're never going to have a perfect situation unless we try it.
Councilmember Dennehy.
I had my button pushed, but Brandon just basically brought up what I was going to be brought up as well. The noise from, I have a neighbor who has a Harley that I get woke up to every time he rides it. And, I don't think to say noise on these UTVs is, some might be louder than others, but, we did put a noise restriction on. We did put a muffler restriction and that on it.
And there's time limits.
Yeah, and there's time limits. They're not allowed to go out at midnight when when my neighbor comes in with his Harley at midnight, and I have no problem with that. He's a great neighbor, but, I think we got to be real careful saying we really need to cover these in a lot more precise way as far as following the noise and the complaints, because if we're going to do that, then let's start following all the other vehicles that are completely legal in the city. If we're going to do this, let's make it fair on all the vehicles and not just pick out these UTVs, because they are an extremely safe vehicle. I do not own one. I know lots of people who do own them, but they are a very safe vehicle. They're a lot safer than a lot of the vehicles that are on the roads today. And I don't think we need to nitpick at this. I think it's something that was looked at fairly hard. I think we had some nice groups that, that worked together on it. And I say, let's just get this going. Let's get them out on the road and see how it goes. If there becomes a problem with it, we'll take, then we'll look at it. But right now, let's do what we said we were going to do.
I'm going to now turn the time over to our public to speak. They will be called out in order that they were received. There is a little stop and go light on the dais. Green means you have your 3 minutes that are designated. Yellow, 30 seconds. Red, your time is up. For the fairness and consistency of all parties involved, we do enforce that time limit. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for being here. The first one that we will hear from is Benjamin.
I'll start by just saying thanks for you all being here. This is the first time I've ever been to a city council meeting, so you guys are here, every couple of weeks and carrying out the business of the city, and seriously appreciate it. So about a little bit of me, I was born here in Canyon City about 45 years ago up on Forest, and had motorcycles from a very young age and would push them across the street and ride into the hogbacks, and went away to college. When I came back, Hogbacks was closed down to riding, and I was pretty disappointed. But I can sort of see some of the reasoning behind it. So it makes me kind of an oddball in my position on this issue. I just learned about it yesterday, but I'm a pretty well-read person, but for whatever reason, it didn't filter down to me. I try to read the paper. I'm up on social network. Connected that way. So I didn't know about this until just basically yesterday. And so your guys' point on messaging and maybe coming up with some uniform way of bringing these issues out to the public might be something worth looking at. I know anytime I do anything with building, whether it's conditional use or these sort of things, they all get published in the paper. People know about them. I mean, it seems like a reasonable thing to have some sort of place that the public can go to that talks about all these and maybe some sort of succinct little blurb about it. And so maybe just something to consider. I've certainly got concerns about UTVs on our street in King City. And like I say, I own motorcycles, I ride them, but I sure don't want them on King City streets. Most people I know are very responsible, and I know they'd be great people to have them, but I've got sort of 4 major concerns. My first one really has to do with health. These vehicles, we talk about their safety and all these kinds of things, and they're great to be, but the problem is these vehicles, on average, emit emissions at least 20 times more than an average vehicle. Many of them, and I went and pulled EPA's documentation on them, many of them emit as much as 100 times like a standard vehicle, and so these vehicles actually fall outside of EPA's regimen for vehicles that go on the road. All these, there's been a reason why there's different categories of vehicles. There's on-road and there's off-road. The vehicles that are on-road have went through a whole series of tests for what they're emitting, carbon monoxide, all these different things. These vehicles have much lower standards. And so if I read the comments right, people are wanting to use these as their like commuting vehicle to work and stuff. Like what? So now we're going to have vehicles that emit these heavy pollutants into our community, and people are going to plan to take it to Walmart and go to the store. I mean, it just seems kind of wild. If it was just for a little recreational use to get across town to get to a trail, I might be a little more for it, but I'm certainly not for it if people are just buzzing around town in them and blowing 2 cycles smoke out the back of their tailpipes in our neighborhood. I mean,
Thank you, Benjamin. I'm afraid your time is up unless City Council wants to extend time for all parties.
Okay, well, I've got 3 other major areas of consideration. If I can just real quickly, I won't make the points, but I'll just say quality of life, safety, and some finance issues. at the state and federal level, all of these things are regulated, safety, emissions, all these things. And so by allowing these vehicles on our city streets, we literally bypass all of these protections that have been put in place. And so I think there's probably some jurisdictional issues as well, but that's a
Thank you.
much bigger
Appreciate
issue,
that.
so. anyways.
And for the record, it's Benjamin, is it Googins?
Googins, Googins.
All right, thank you very much.
You
And
And we did receive your email.
Okay.
So we do, yeah,
That
we
was
do
shocking how
have,
fast that went. Holy cow. I was just
we do
just
have your
getting started.
record, and city council can, absolutely, we can ask you to come and
Okay.
and
Was it
expound more.
5 minutes or was it?
It's 3
3.
minutes.
Oh, 3. I thought it said 15 on the website. Oh, I'm pretty sure it says 15. Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. We can still have a very robust conversation. Kristen, economy.
Should I lower this? I'm not a fan of microphones. Can you hear me?
Yep.
We can-
Okay, I'm used to talking to high schoolers in my normal voice, however. Okay, thanks for having me here this evening. I am Kristen Economy. It's been a while since I've talked before City Council. My teaching position has made me quite busy the last couple of years especially, so I appreciate you listening to my comments this evening, even though it's been a little while. I did write a letter. I'm assuming you all had received it, so thank you for taking the time to look at that. I am part of the I Love Everybody Club, that I really love community coming together. I love outdoors and spending time in nature. I love that we have a variety of recreational amenities, everything from dirt biking, UTVs, mountain bikes, hikes, river walk. There's really something for everybody to come here and get together and do something and enjoy our lovely days we have out here in the Banana Belt of Colorado. However, like I stated in my letter, and you explained much better to me, Brandon Smith, so thank you very much, about the purpose of this, because while I've sort of been following this, I actually tried to come to the meeting a couple weeks ago, but I had a conflict, but it kept nagging at me, which is why I wrote my letter earlier today. I don't quite understand the purpose. I see better purpose now about like, oh, it'd be really neat if we did this, if we could connect trails. Other places where we do this, the most notable is Moab, Utah. And in Moab, there are hundreds of miles of trails, not of motorized trails, that people want to connect. We don't have hundreds of miles here. We have small trail systems. I think allowing UTVs on streets is incompatible with our community and our needs and our desires here. Right now, our trailheads are very rarely crowded to the point where it would make sense to allow us even to drive to the trailheads instead of driving our equipment there. And I do have issues with air pollution and noise pollution. 96 decibels is actually still quite loud, even though it's delineated. I don't think that's appropriate for my city streets. I would want it to be more compatible with cars. And you brought up motorcycles. I don't like the loud motorcycles that ride around my downtown neighborhood either. Those should be enforced. Those are problems that need to be enforced by us here in the city. If the city should decide to go forward with this in some form or another, I would request that the city purchase decibel reading materials, however that is, or am I allowed to record that on my phone through a decibel reading app? I'm not sure how that would go. That's one of my biggest concerns, however. I would also like to note that Moab is pulling back on their UTV and lowering speeds, as well as the noise levels. And even though they're kind of like the king of outdoor recreation and motorized, they're the ones pulling back as well, as we are starting to only begin to look at this issue. Okay, thank you. I was just going to say, I like the idea of having diverse stakeholder groups at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Before I call the next person, Chief, can we talk a little bit about decimal reading? Because we've actually have had this conversation before, particularly around semi-trucks and Jake brakes, and some of the struggles that we've had around this topic.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Mayor. This is a challenging area for us. We don't have anything in the city code or the state code that refers directly to decibels in terms of enforcement. it's all ambiguous, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Sellers.
Yeah, I would,
It's
it's
very
broadly
ambi-
worded without the specifics of
Yeah,
decibels. Yeah.
it's very ambiguous, and we would have a problem enforcing it. I'm not saying that it's a bad idea, but then again, you go to Councilmember Smith's point of trying to take this across the spectrum and make sure that we're applying it equitably. It would be an undertaking. I only had a couple hours to prepare for today, but I pulled the noise complaints that we had in 2021. Now, again, only a couple hours of data search, and to Ms. Tracy's point, we definitely have the ability to track these and monitor the data related to these types of calls in our record management system, as well as our C-Click Fix app. But I have 42 calls through our CAD, our computer-aided dispatch and records management system internally last year. So we get calls. I wouldn't say that we get a lot of calls, but it would be problematic for us to enforce that, and we'd have to look at modifying our code to reach the goal or the ends that we're looking to get to.
Chief, on those 42 calls, does it have a description of what types of noise complaints they are?
Yes,
Because that
ma'am.
could be domestic abuse next door, or?
No, these are-
Okay, they're all,
Yeah, no,
Motorized
these are
vehicles.
garden variety car music, revving engines, loud motorcycles, loud vehicle, truck running, generator running. So it's across the board.
across the
Can I
board.
chime in here too? And that's another reason why we set some time limits from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. was to mitigate some of the noise. And that was actually requested by the group at the table because they know that this is a trial basis and they want to make sure it's going to be successful. So they don't want anybody zipping around with a loud unit in the middle of the night that's going to endanger them from getting this either reversed or not passed at all.
Okay, thank you. Anything further as far as, I just wanted to establish that we don't have decimal readers, we don't have a code, and to be able to enforce that. It's something
ma'am.
we've spoken about, the ability to enforce it is very, very difficult.
It is, yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Let's turn our time over to our next citizen's request, and that's Ryan Hand.
Good evening, council. Again, it's good to see you guys again. I had one quick thing I wanted to talk about on the city code. It was written and the portion about safety equipment. We talked about it previously. I was going to be enforced kind of like motorcycles, but it kind of reads like you're supposed to have a helmet on all the time. So I just wanted to take a very small snippet and just point that section out so you guys can reread it. And then real quickly, while I'm on my time, I wanted to go through and just kind of address a couple concerns that a couple of people have pointed out. And part of it was already pointed out yourself about how we don't have certain guidelines within the city to police those things. And I heard the one gentleman speak about emissions as well. We're not required to pass an emissions test down here in order to register a vehicle. And that being said, I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to go burn my own personal hole in the ozone with my vehicle. Two strokes especially, they're going to be on the upper end of worst. None of these vehicles, obviously, like we're talking about using, are going to be two-stroke. They're all four-stroke. They operate more like a regular motorcycle or car engine than anything. And I don't want to attest to say, sure, they're better on emissions, but for the limited amount of use, I don't see it being a big impact. I put 20,000 miles a year on my personal vehicle that I drive every day, and this will be probably 1,000 miles a year. So I don't think the usage is going to equal a point that necessarily matters as much. And then just looking into some concerns with some people on health and safety, I want to try and be as much of an open book to everyone as possible, and at the same time, we're trying to go through get everybody's good graces and ask for permission. But some of the opposition, I guess I just want to reach out and ask why some of the people have opposition to things, and not try to do it in a way that's snide, because I don't really understand, because other than the fact they look different, Are you more likely to be crashed into one or by somebody driving one than another vehicle? No. If you were you be hurt worse because they're driving one? No. They're not going to be any louder. You know, I mean, the emissions, I don't want to argue that to any point because quite honestly, I'm not educated enough to argue that. But I just want to, while we're asking permission, I just don't want to feel like we're being opposed just for the sake of being opposed. Some of it I don't understand the inconvenience because they're honestly just another vehicle. And whether we want to have them to access a trailhead or whether I just want to go get groceries in it because it's 80 degrees outside and it's fun to drive, I don't think it should really matter because it's another vehicle. And I don't want to step on people's toes, but I guess I want to invite them to give me an avenue to look through from their perspective. So maybe I can educate myself if I don't understand, you know, what the opposition is. So having the chance to listen to some other people's opposition is helpful because, you know, it gives me a perspective that maybe I don't have, and I want to invite them to look in at our same perspective as well and say, we don't really understand why they're different because, you know, they're not, they're four wheels, a steering wheel, and some seatbelts like 90% of the vehicles we have on the road, and every bit is safe. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate your time with the people that have spoken. Maybe we all have the opportunity to speak to each other in transparency. So thank you, guys.
So, Ryan, I believe we have a question for you by Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. And thank you so much for those comments. I think that they really speak to what the mayor said at the opening about how it's really important to have that diverse stakeholder group so that everybody's at the table for those work sessions and everybody can hear each other's perspectives and points of view and is able to understand each other and put yourself in each other's perspectives. I did have a couple of questions. One was about riding to trailheads and accessing trailheads. I guess I'm confused because I don't know of trailheads that you can access from city streets where UTVs are allowed.
To be completely honest with you, there's really no access directly within the city limits. I mean, you would need to go into the county, which is kind of the ultimate goal, is to go to the county. Because right now, the minute you get outside of the city limits, you may get close to a place, but you're not going to actually get there without crossing into the county. So that doesn't completely cross that box. And that is one portion of it, of the end goal, is that, you know, we move from here to the county and hopefully everyone's on their best behavior, no one's too upset at us, and we can make that something where Custer County, Fremont County, because, you know, like Florence has them legalized, so everybody's very close without technically being connected. So that would open up a big, you know, opportunity for that. But in the immediate time, just the privilege to be able just to use them around town as a vehicle, because it may seem silly, but I mean, I know that my kids like to go, you know, to Sonic and get an ice cream or just to run to the store. And it's something I choose to use as an opportunity to build some memories that are different than just every other things with my family. So while it doesn't necessarily make sense to everybody, in the immediate term, that's something that is important to some of us.
No, absolutely. And thank you for clarifying about the trailheads, because that was something that I couldn't quite connect the dots.
Yeah, it's
there.
confusing for sure.
The two other questions or thoughts that I had, after the last meeting that we had on this, where we had the first reading and we were discussing the noise control, I went and looked up, you know, what the state Department of Wildlife, I think it is, rules on the mufflers actually are, and then what the decibel levels are that are different. And I guess for UTVs, it's 96 decibels, and the average car is 62 decibels. So there is a pretty substantial difference. Understand that they all have four wheels and seat belts, but there is a pretty substantial difference in terms of the noise level of an average UTV and an average car. And then very lastly, I don't know enough to know the difference between 4-stroke and 2-stroke, but I think the way that this is written right now, any of them would be allowed. So completely understand that it would not be your intention to drive the one that is the higher emissions. And I don't know enough about the EPA regs yet, but that sounds really scary. But I think the way that this is currently written, you could drive either one.
Right, and to be completely honest with you, and I mean, I don't want to say that I know everything. I'm not aware of a single UTV manufactured at this point that's 2-stroke. There are some ATVs that are 2-stroke and motorcycles that are 2-stroke. I don't think that there's a factory manufactured 2-stroke UTV that's made that I can think of. So I don't think that would be an issue at this point, because unless somebody's, you know, someone somewhere in a barn has taken a snowmobile motor and put it in a UTV and ran that as a 2-stroke, but they weren't manufactured that way from the from the get-go. So in a sense, it couldn't be possible with just UTVs. ATVs and motorcycles will be different.
Thank you for clarifying that.
No problem.
All right. Next up is Scott Ekstrom.
Do I need to give my address?
Welcome back to
Hey,
the
hi, everybody.
chambers.
Hey, do I need to give my address or can we go?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
Got a green light.
The first thing I'd ask is that our senior council members, one of you make a motion on behalf of our newer freshman council members to table this for further discussion. If it comes from you, it's going to sound a lot better than it coming from them, okay? Because there's clearly a lot of concern regarding this matter, and myself, as not only a business owner, but as a local community, a person that has a home and enjoys the outdoors, I was kind of taken off guard by this when I heard it 2 hours ago, maybe. Yeah. I reached out to some other community members, and some of them had heard about it. And to the history that was laid out before us, yes, it was brought up pre-COVID, but as we are now out of that and we're looking at this again, I really believe that we need to involve the community and those different user groups. I could read a text from a user group that said that they were actually not invited to the original meeting. That doesn't seem like a community meeting to me. So I've collected a lot of concerns throughout the discussion tonight. I'm not sure that I can get through them all. Some of them were brought up: noise, pollution, parking's one of them, tourism. I'm kind of concerned about the implications that we could have with tourism. Some of the arguments for it was, let's go with it. Let's try it for a year and see how it goes. Well, there's other communities that have tried this in the past, and they've turned back and made regulations against this. One particular community is Ouray. I was there. I had to go out of the town limits to take one of these fun vehicles. They are fun. To take one of these fun vehicles around. They would not allow them in the city limits. So, something to consider. They don't allow them in Moab. Moab, although we are light years from there, not really. One day we're going to be having to deal with this, and I'm not sure we want all of this at once. Let's think about it a little bit more. We can give this another week or two, but let's open it up to community discussion, because if I'm just now hearing about this, there's a lot of other individuals that are not just now hearing about this. And on behalf of our new council members, I think they need a little time to think about this. This was a unanimous vote 2 weeks ago. Given the gravity of this, I think they need more time to think about it. 20 seconds.
Thank you, former Councilman Ekstrom. We do have an online request to speak to council, and that's Heather Darrow, and we will now get you online. We'll wait till you're all set up to go before we start your 3-minute timer. Heather, are you there? Heather? Heather? So we're not getting Heather coming through.
Are you sure you're on unmute, Heather?
I would. Let's see what we have, a chat.
Hello?
There
Yes.
we go.
You hear me
Okay,
now?
Heather, you are now online. We will start your timer for 3 minutes. I'll give you a 30-second warning. You can-
Okay. Am I supposed to talk now or?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I also have expressed some concerns as well with air quality. Canyon City was previously in a non-attainment area for basically for emissions, particulate matter. And it was only like, I think 15 years ago that we were then, taken out of that because of efforts from the state to get us into that non-attainment. And so now we're in a maintenance area where we need to be making sure we don't go above those thresholds. And so I had written a letter earlier today about that. And I guess one consideration is, if you add another mobile source of emissions, do we need to then maybe, run that by the EPA because they are, because now there's a new source of emissions in our area. That's something I was trying to research today. And I don't know, I just think it's something to look into. We have a very, we have an elderly population that makes up a good portion of our population, and asthma is definitely a consideration with higher emission levels. And so that, I guess that was my big concern. Some other concerns that I had were safety. If we make the age, if the requirement is only that you have a driver's license and a sticker from Fish and Wildlife, or not Fish and Wildlife, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, then would high schoolers be driving these? I guess my concern would be, I've seen high schoolers riding around on mopeds in town, and they haven't been wearing helmets. And I know that would be one of the rules that, you got to wear a helmet. But I guess I'm just concerned with that age group in particular about, some accidents that could happen as a result of this. I also have some noise concerns as well, but others have already brought that up. So yeah, that's really all I had to say. So.
Thank you, Heather. We appreciate you joining us online. Brandon, I noticed we have a new number online. Is that Councilmember Reed? So I would like to make note for public record that Councilmember Reed has now joined this meeting. We've received all of the requests to speak to council. Chief, if you wouldn't mind, there has been several comments around safety. I know that the CCPD has been asked about safety. We'd like to maybe again, for those new to the meetings that haven't heard before, can we talk a little bit about your concerns for safety and maybe some of the mitigation that has been done in this ordinance to address that?
Yes, ma'am. And to the gentleman's point that was talking for, regarding the helmets, I read that the same way, but I think that's referring to the Colorado Revised Statutes defining the helmets themselves. When I first read it, I thought the same thing. And it also describes those under 18 that have to be. So generally speaking, in terms of safety, yes, we went back and forth on this issue quite a bit. Mitigating factors that we discussed and came to agreement on were lighting, headlights and tail lights, and turn signals, speedometers, so that we know our vehicles are traveling the same posted speed limit as everyone else. We also talked about, yes, the functioning speedometer. So though all of those things were added to kind of mitigate the safety concerns. And, to Councilmember Smith's point and others, I've looked for safety studies that indicate UTVs are somehow more dangerous than any of the other automobiles that we have on the road. I can't find it. So, speaking from the police perspective, we know that speed is the #1 influencing factor in motor vehicle accidents and their significance. We've put speed limits on the streets. We're requiring these vehicles to have speedometers so that they are aware of how fast they're going, and that'll mitigate enforcement issues that we may have if people breach the speed limit. So I think we've done just about everything that we can to mitigate the safety concerns while still respecting the freedom and riding conditions that the folks in the UTVs would like to experience.
All right, thank you, Chief. Councilmember Schmischer?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a couple of questions for you as well, Chief, just on the safety aspect. I believe Mr. Guggens may have mentioned in his email a question about reporting and whether or not UTVs have license plates, so that if people do notice ones that are particularly loud or maybe aren't compliant with some of the provisions that are in this ordinance, how they would actually be able to effectively report them to the police.
Well, that is an interesting point. And we had talked about an independent license for the city, but we opted to go with what Parks and Wildlife issues. So I'm not certain that would be an excellent way of identifying the vehicles. So that is certainly a point of consideration. I know that the dispatchers, as they take that call, would look for a more detailed description of the vehicle. And oftentimes, our callers will be traveling in the same direction as the vehicle and stay on the line with the dispatchers while they relay the information to responding units.
Thank you.
Just-
Just quickly, go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to say, just to follow up on those comments, the process that we were looking at from the city was not dissimilar from what the state does. So issuing a sticker similar to what the state currently does for their permitting, it wouldn't have been very much different. We weren't going to be issuing license plates or anything like that.
And just kind of as an added kind of concern for identification, like we already have problems at the parking lot by the train in Veterans Park with people in regular cars doing donuts and behaving in really dangerous and irritating behavior with their vehicles. And so I definitely wouldn't want to see UTVs to amp that type of behavior in the area, because I know that it's a great concern to those in those areas. So identification would be something to take into consideration. Although we are purchasing security cameras or surveillance cameras, which will be at this location, hopefully, if that's approved by City Council for ARPA funds, which could be an added benefit on that realm.
I just had one additional question for the chief.
Absolutely.
If that's okay. I believe I understand correctly that one of the main purposes, not the only, but one of the main purposes behind this is the desire to access trailheads that are not currently contiguous with city streets. Have there been any conversations with Fremont County law enforcement? My understanding is that they had previously denied this because of concerns from Fremont County law enforcement at the county level. So I'm wondering if we've had those conversations to know if it is likely to be approved, or if we could potentially inadvertently maybe be creating a problem for them.
I haven't had any conversations with Fremont County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you, Chief.
I have not either.
Any other comments from council?
I might have one, but I was going to see if Councilmember Reed was going to comment.
Mandy, would you like to have an opportunity to address council and the audience here? Mandy? Well, if Mandy...
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yes, would you like to
We're good?
address
Okay.
council?
Well, I first want to apologize. I'm traveling, and so I wasn't able to get on, but I have been able to watch everything through Facebook, so I really appreciate everyone's comments tonight. I guess one of the things that is pressing on my mind is the fact that this was something that was brought to council by a citizen group, and so I appreciate the extensive amount of time on research and conversations and repeated meetings that have been going on with this citizen group to be able to bring this proposal forward. I understand the concerns that have been brought forth tonight as far as other groups in the community. my perspective on that is just the stakeholders that were originally involved with the UTVs. You know, I agree that it probably would have been a good opportunity to be able to bring other people to the table, but I feel like this opportunity tonight is the perfect platform for us to be able to hear everyone. I'm still for trying this, mainly because it is something that has been brought forth by citizens. And I feel like there are ways that we can continue to regulate this. And I understand the point about other communities trying and failing. But as a council, we've said that we are going to be more business friendly, and we're trying to take a bold approach forward to bring us into the next phase of Canyon City. And so I know that there's going to be areas where we possibly make mistakes and there's going to have to be some trial and error. But I just feel like this situation is a really great opportunity and it has some high potential for going really, really well. The people who've brought this forward have shown over and over again a willingness to comply, a willingness to cooperate, respect for our trails, respect for our community. And so I just feel strongly that we need to be able to give them the opportunity to show that this is, in fact, something worth considering and could be really good for our community. So that's my 2 cents on all of it. I appreciate all of the questions and things tonight that have been brought forth and the consideration that council has put into this. But I do think that it's something that we should try to move forward and at least make an honest attempt at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Reed. We'll now turn to Councilmember Tracy.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to go back to something I asked about earlier, and that is, I guess it's maybe a legal question or a question for staff or our attorney. Can we add language in an ordinance like this one that would be like what the state legislature sometimes does on legislation, where there's a sunset provision where the legislation expires at a certain date in the future unless it's reenacted or renewed in some way?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Because I think we know that a lot of work has gone into putting this ordinance together and a lot of input in the past and today and tonight, and which is all quite valuable. But we know that it is something different and new, and we talked about it last meeting that we would like to do this as kind of an experiment for perhaps a year. It could be a different period of time if that makes sense. But I would be in favor of adding something in like that, for at least having that under consideration, that we put a sunset provision in so that we're really explicitly saying to ourselves and to the community and to everyone that we want to evaluate how it goes here. And is it going to work for our community or is it not?
Thank you, Councilwoman Tracy. And I would say that if there is an interest for council to do that, that would require, of course, an amendment to the motion. Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to thank everybody who's come out to speak tonight and write letters and who have come out many times to speak on this issue. It's nice to see you again, Mr. Hand. I think it is really, really important that we get everybody's perspectives and not just in a formal hearing where we can't really look line by line at an ordinance. I think it is really important that when we have stakeholder conversations that all stakeholders are invited and can be part of that conversation, including folks who have concerns about this and who have raised a lot of concerns on a lot of different issues. I also think it's important that we are communicative and collaborative with our other local governments who could be impacted by the ordinances that we pass. So from my perspective, I think it would definitely make the most sense to table it so that we allow time for those conversations. I understand the desire, absolutely. When citizen groups come forward, when they have a vested interest, when they want to make those really special memories with their kids, and also just enjoy their own, their own outdoor recreation. Like, that's wonderful, and I absolutely want to support that. But I want to make sure that we're doing it in the right way, and that we're ensuring that we're allowing sufficient time for all voices to be heard and for everybody to be able to contribute to those conversations in a much more formalized process and not as one agenda item on a very long agenda. And I think Mr. Hand said it really well when he spoke about wanting to understand everyone's perspectives and wanting to make sure that there is that kind of community buy-in and support, that we're all in this together, that we all want to make sure that everybody, we're not endangering anybody else's enjoyment or infringing on their rights, or that we can all get along and do this collaboratively. So I don't see any particular harm. We've already been waiting a long time on this particular issue. So I think if we table it and if we take another month even to have additional stakeholder groups where everybody can actually sit down, talk about what the concerns are, talk about what the issues are, see if this is the right language, see if this really meets the needs of where our community is and where we want to go. I don't know why we wouldn't take that month. If there aren't other folks
There is one more person who would like to address council, but just for point of order, that if that is a desire, that would also take a motion to table it with a specific date for when it would come back to council consideration. I would like to hear from Councilmember Smith first.
I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight as well. When we started this process in July of 2021, I'm sure I can speak for Councilwoman Reed as well. We thought everybody was invited to the table. Communication is always something we as council struggle with. We have social media, YouTube, public access, and our local publications. We have people that come here sometimes and they're like, I don't read, I don't watch TV, so how do we communicate, at the best? I don't have a problem with tabling this to a later conversation, but we have worked pretty hard. I feel like our safety, even though there wasn't opposition at the table, I felt, and I'm sure that Councilwoman Reed felt at the same time, that it was our obligation as council to make sure that this was going to be safe, that this was going to provide the definitions and the safety and the violations that people in opposition would want to see. So I feel like we've done a pretty great job at the document that's here, if it's been read. But if we need to have more conversations, we do.
Thank you. Ryan Stevens.
I just want to reiterate what Councilman Smith just said. From a staff perspective, that was our number one priority, was safety. And during some of those stakeholder meetings, we were approached with the idea of tourism dollars, and the stance that staff took with that was, that's not what's important. What's important is the safety aspect. We don't want people getting hurt or killed. We want to make sure that we're doing what's right from a safety standpoint, and that's the lens that staff took while evaluating this ordinance.
Thank you, Ryan. And as part of just the publication and communication, I just wanted to also clarify that on February 8th of 2022, there was an article published in the Daily Record about this particular topic. Councilmember Schmischer?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And actually, before I make that motion, I guess I'm wondering, could we do better on communication? One idea that was floated to me today is, in the same way that we publish other notices in the Daily Record, could we just publish our agenda, the week before? Or could we?
Then every time you amend it, you wouldn't get it through time-wise for them.
Sure.
It takes
Sure.
me about a week normally to get, though the ordinance is published. Every ordinance is published.
How far in advance? Like when was this one
After we
put
did
in the
the
Daily
first
Record?
reading, it is published before the second reading.
Okay.
So,
I guess maybe it would be helpful for us to do some brainstorming about what is within the
Right.
realm of
Well,
the possible,
yeah.
so that we can make sure that we are more actively
I
communicating.
just read about timing from newspapers.
Sure.
Sometimes we're not able to get
Well,
things.
and we
done.
have this conversation a lot, and we can continue to have this conversation and welcome it.
So, sorry, that was, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I do have 3 Eagle Scout boys, and I was the merit badge counselor for citizenship of the nation and citizenship of the world and citizenship of the community. And number one and foremost, it is our duty as citizens to be actively searching and looking and have our hands on the tab of what's happening in our communities. And so that's where the ultimate responsibility lies. And we do, and we have really done a lot better in the past 6 years, but there's always room for improvement. And we always welcome as much communication and transparency as we can. So we'll definitely have future conversations on that.
Great,
So back
thank
to
you. I have one more question before I make my motion. Administrator Stevens, what do you think is a reasonable amount of time for staff to convene appropriate stakeholder groups to take a look at this issue? I definitely don't want to make a motion for it to come back too soon, but I also don't want to delay it unnecessarily.
I'd ask Chief Schick, as far as reaching out to the county and getting a response back regarding to this issue, how much time do you think you would need for that?
I can do that pretty quickly.
Yeah,
And
I think.
I would just ask, is that the breadth of the search, is just the county? I know.
No,
Florence is-
that's just one aspect of it. So I
Okay.
think, I don't want to shortchange you by putting a date out there.
No, I can take care of that pretty quick.
Okay. I would say, a month to 6 weeks to make sure that we, put it out there. So I would say either the second meeting in March or the first meeting in April.
Are you talking about going back to, you had said soliciting for letters, and what level are you talking about for meetings? That
I
would
think-
take time. That's what I'm
I'm
wondering.
thinking we're looking more at this point, and council, you can correct us, maybe more chances to sit at the table together and just have some, maybe less formal conversations about this and make sure that everyone's voice feels heard.
So a general government meeting?
Yeah, I think we're talking about,
Like
a
another
stakeholder
stakeholder
committee
meeting with Councilmember Reed and Councilmember Smith.
Correct.
And invite FAR and other maybe organizations to make sure that there's an invitation if they want to be there.
And certainly anyone who came this evening to speak.
Absolutely. So maybe it would be good to set up a date for that meeting so that that's known in advance. Councilmember Smith,
I'm just looking at dates.
I think we need to definitely accommodate your schedule.
Oh, I'm pretty easy, so.
Ryan, do you have any recommendations?
As far as a date for the stakeholder meeting?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Mandy.
Sorry. I was trying to say yes, that sounds great, and I couldn't figure out a way to make that work.
Your schedule's a little bit more tricky. Do you have certain time frame when you'd be available for a another stakeholder meeting?
I will have to do it remote, but I will work, you guys let me know, and I will figure out a way, and I'll talk to Ryan about it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So my suggestion would be the afternoon of Monday, March 14th.
So Monday,
I like Mondays.
March 14th. Ah, that's right. No, you're doing on-site research.
Moab is significantly different.
I didn't give up my spring break.
Well, we could do it the following Monday, the 21st. Would that work?
March 21st time? Can we, perhaps an evening time for those who are working and have
You
business?
have council that evening.
What's that? The evening time for the community. So it
That's a
would not
council
be the
meeting.
21st.
Yeah, so then. Probably the evening of the 22nd then, the Tuesday. Would that work for you, Councilman Smith?
Yep, I'm easy.
Tuesday, 22nd, 6 p.m.?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. here in the lower chambers of City Hall stakeholder meeting. Ryan, will you be the officiator over this meeting to
I will.
maintain neutrality in the discussions?
And it will just be the two council members?
Just the two council members, unless we want to make it a public meeting.
I think if it's a community meeting that we're publicizing widely and I think it doesn't there's no harm in making it a public meeting so that additional people can participate.
Okay, cover all of our bases. Scott, one more thing?
I was just going to say that there's some new
Okay. It is a public meeting. All are involved, even city council members, more than 2. And it has been duly noted and it will be publicized so that we meet our sunshine requirements. All right.
I think we may have to vote on the motion before we can actually.
We haven't even made a motion
Yeah.
yet.
Yes.
But now we know the date of the meeting, which will influence the date of when this is tabled till.
So I would propose actually tabling it until the April 18th city council meeting, given that we won't be meeting until March 21st. And that will also be a week after the city-county meeting, so that we have another opportunity to talk to county leadership in addition to county law enforcement, to make sure that we're being good neighbors. So with that, Madam Mayor, I would like to make a motion that we table this ordinance number 4, series of 2022, to enable additional consultations, a stakeholder community public meeting on March 21st at 6 p.m. and March 22nd in City Council lower chambers, and that we table the ordinance until the April 18th regular City Council meeting.
There has been a motion.
Sorry, can I add one more phrase to my motion? And that before that March 2022 meeting, that city staff and city attorneys do additional research into the concerns that citizens have raised, including the concern about EPA and our non-attainment or attainment area status. Thank you.
So a motion has been made. We would need a second.
I second.
There's been a motion and a second. Councilmember Tracy, I noticed you have had your button on for a little while. Would you like to make a comment?
I was prepared to move approval on second reading with an amendment, but we're now in a motion to table, so I don't have anything further.
Any other discussion? Then I will call the vote on the motion to table this until April 18th.
Councilmember Dennehy?
Nay.
Councilmember Reed?
Nay.
I'm just confirming that was a nay? No?
That is correct.
Thank you. Councilmember Schmischer?
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith?
No.
Councilmember Stein?
Yes.
Councilmember Tracy?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
You are the tiebreaker.
I have the tiebreaker tonight. I'd just like to preface my vote with, I appreciate every council member's view, but I think that at this point, it probably is appropriate to table, so my vote is aye.
So the motion has passed to table this until April 18th. 4-3, there will be a stakeholder meeting Tuesday, March 22nd at 6 p.m. here in City Council lower chambers. We've got to see local governments and the basic, you guys are all Eagle Scouts now. You got your merit badge. You participated in local governance and still want to recognize all the work that has gone into this ordinance as is, really has addressed a lot of issues, and I think we're on a good foundation to continue these discussions to another level. Okay, with that, we still have more business to do, council members. We are now on C, second reading and adoption by title only of Ordinance 5, Series of 2022. And this is the ordinance amending certain sections of Title 17 of the Municipal Code concerning recreational vehicle parks and drainage easements.
Again, thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. This is a second reading. Staff has not received any public comments regarding this second reading, and staff would recommend approving on the second reading.
Is there any further questions from City Council for the staff? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion. Councilmember Smith.
Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve ordinance number 5, series of 2022 on second reading.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
Councilmember Dennehy?
Aye.
Councilmember Schmisher?
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Stein?
Aye.
Councilmember Tracy?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Thank you, council. We're now on item 7A. This is for an executive session to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pursuant to CRS 24-6-4024B concerning options for providing electric power to the city. Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick, can you please make a motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that City Council enter into executive sessions for the following purposes. Executive session to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pursuant to CRS 24-6-4024B concerning options for providing electric power to the city.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call vote.
Councilmember Dennehy?
Aye.
Councilmember Schmisher?
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Stein?
Aye.
Councilmember Tracy?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
We will now go into an executive session.